The important thing, if you want to be a creative person, is at some point to realize the difference between making a living and making a life. Now, most of us, when we grew up, really our parents, with our middle class insecurities, especially during the period of the Nehruvian economy, when jobs were very limited. So we were told to go into medicine, law, engineering, and as was I. But I ended up in philosophy. And early on, I was lucky to realize that you go to the university not only to make a living, to learn to make a living, but also to learn to make a life. You play a thought game. Most of us play thought games when we are young, especially when you're in the university, you go to and at night is when the action is, when you're sitting with your pals in the hostel, and then somebody asks, what if you had only 6 months to live? How would you live your life? Well, you certainly wouldn't go live your life getting an MBA at that point. Creativity and innovation, which is what this segment is all about, really begins with a personal responsibility. We're not all born Mozarts. When at the age of 3, Mozart knew that he would become a great composer. He was composing at the age of 3. Most of us have just sort of stumbled through life, and if we're lucky, we find a passion. It's quite amazing that most people just go through life not particularly enjoying their work. They're just doing it because they have to do it. And then at the end of the day, they don't like their work. Freud said that the definition of happiness consisted of two things. One was to love the work you do, and second was to love the person you live with. Most of us have just sort of stumbled through life, and if we're lucky, we find a passion. And one way you know that you have found it is that time gets distorted. That is to say, that you suddenly see doing something, and suddenly say, oh my God, it's 6:30. I thought it was 4:30. Those 2 hours, you were just so absorbed that you had lost the sense of time. And this is what also athletes call being in the zone. Creativity needs a certain tolerance for uncertainty. The human life is uncertain. We don't know when we are going to be born. We don't know when we are going to die. And one of the things that human beings do is they create the state to bring some kind of predictability into their life. But the quest for too much certainty also creates its own problems. It creates sometimes an oppressive state. And we have seen oppressive states in the 20th century and how much damage they have done. Or it creates a nanny state as the welfare state to some extent. If you know what the health and safety rules now in Europe and in North America, you'd be shocked that the kind of things the state has got into. Anyway, markets thrive on uncertainty. And a competitor can suddenly come up with a discontinuity, and suddenly he obsoletes your product, and you're finished. And so the markets also fail at some times. And when markets fail, we want them, we seek regulation. And in that quest for regulation, we sometimes overdo it. And when we overdo it, we get what we've classically in India, we've known as license, permit, inspector, Raj, to quote, use the words of Rajaji.